Over 26 million Texans are now being governed by a handful of extremists who have caused oppressive loss of liberties, restricting voting rights, outlawing all abortions, discriminating against LGBTQ kids, banning books, putting our lives at risk by allowing weapons of war to be carried publicly without permits. These were extreme, fringe thoughts not long ago. Now they're law, and it's only going to get worse unless we join together as Texans to stop it while we still have a chance.
Look, there are a lot of states with Republican governors who actually govern. Texas just ain't one of them. Hey, Abbott, instead of focusing on the culture war, investigating parents, muzzling teachers, banning books, threatening women and their doctors, all while making sure that anybody with a pulse can walk around armed to the teeth, you could have spent the last 8 years working on things like jobs, education, public safety, and healthcare. You know, in other words, you could have just done your job.
Abbott and I have a few things in common. We're both lawyers, we've both worked on state policy, and we both use a wheelchair. But I didn't receive a $10 million settlement from my disability. Unlike Abbott, I have to worry about rising healthcare expenses, inadequate wages for the caregivers that I rely on, long wait lists for community-based services, and the very real threat of institutionalization. Life for Texans with disabilities keeps getting harder, and now he's even made voting more difficult for us. If you became disabled tomorrow, you might think, at least I live in a state where the governor also has a disability. But turns out it doesn't matter. Texas ranks at the bottom of every list that counts for people with disabilities. Just because our governor uses a wheelchair doesn't mean that he has empathy, compassion, or care about people living in this state. He needs to go.
Greg Abbott, he gets majority of his money from less than 50 rich donors and extremist PACs that set his agenda. The guys he's representing can just walk around into his office, or they can just call him on the phone. He didn't even notice. They can tell him what they want. And it sure as hell isn't better quality of life for us. Hell no. He's protecting them. He's not protecting us.
Abbott doesn't have a plan. Whenever anything goes wrong, he blames someone else. His campaign slogan may as well be, "Government's broken. Keep electing me so I can point fingers and show you how broken it is." That's not leadership.
When we need Abbott to do something about health care or gun safety, he says he can't because he's protecting freedom. When we need him to get the heck out of our businesses, our doctors' offices, and our classrooms, he says he has to be all over that to protect freedom. Whose freedom? I'm feeling a lot less free under this guy.
Greg Abbott, you claim that you're a good governor, but I disagree. You spend money like a drunken sailor on your border fantasies, removing money from our programs and institutions. You put our educational funding into a rainy day fund, causing our local school districts to raise property taxes. And so that you can get a campaign kickback from your energy buddies.
Greg, just because oppression and discrimination isn't important to you, or doesn't exist in your world or among your circle of friends, doesn't mean it isn't happening. In fact, it's coming from you. For instance, what I can do with my body. If I don't want to have a child, can't have a child, am the victim of incest or rape, it is not your choice what I can do. It's not fair that you and men like you think that you can police women's bodies. It's not fair for a woman who maybe can't emotionally, financially, or physically handle the burden of carrying a child be forced to carry a child. How dare you? How dare you punish women because of what you think and how you feel? It's not right.
As a mom, I would do everything I can to make sure my kiddos have the best possible outcome for success in life. And if you're a parent, I know you would do the same thing, right? But here's the deal. Texas, thanks to Governor Greg Abbott, now ranks last in the nation for uninsured people. Do you know what happens when we have the most uninsured people in the country? Those folks, the uninsured ones, they avoid healthcare because they can't afford it. Kids don't do their well check visits. They don't get to go to the dentist. Teen birth rates go up. Pregnant women don't get the prenatal healthcare they need. And then, guess what happens? More women die giving birth in Texas than almost any other state in the country. And you know that number's gonna go up because Governor Greg Abbott is blocking women's reproductive health rights and safe abortion access. Are you okay with more women dying? Oh, you're not? Cool.
Come on now, don't be scared that someone's going to take your guns. This is Texas, for God's sake. You know what you really ought to be scared of is some crazy 18-year-old incel that's lost down some dark internet rabbit hole of hate with an AR-15. Beto is not the fanatic on guns. Abbott is. And what we want are some common sense gun laws.
In other parts of our country, it's not illegal to actually do something about gun violence. Look at this. After the Parkland school shooting, here's Republican Governor Rick Scott.
We will require all individuals purchasing firearms to be 21 or older.
After the Santa Fe school shooting here in Texas, here's what Greg Abbott had to say.
We need to do more than just pray for the victims and their families. It's time in Texas that we take action to step up and make sure this tragedy is never repeated ever again in the history of the state of Texas.
But here's what he did. He made it easier for 18-year-olds to have an automatic weapon with no training and no permits. So when an 18-year-old with an AR-15 killed 21 in Uvalde, here's what Abbott had to say.
It could have been worse.
It could have been worse? I don't know your definition of worse, Greg.
Greg Abbott has once again declared war on a large group of us Texans, either because of the color of our skin or our accent. He once actually said, if we're going to defend Texas, we'll need to take matters into our own hands. Well, that's exactly what a racist murderer did when he killed 23 people in El Paso. Oh, Abbott apologized and agreed to tone it down a bit. But now that he's in a tight race, oh, he's right back at it, signing an executive order against migrants at the border to stop an invasion. His words. Words matter. This is the kind of racist BS that leads to a body count. But Abbott just keeps on fueling those not-so-subtle racist fires. Because trading Texas lives for political capital is what Abbott is all about.
When asked a question about his forcing victims of rape and incest to carry to term, this is what Abbott said.
Rape is a crime, and Texas will work tirelessly to make sure that we eliminate all rapists from the streets of Texas by aggressively going out and arresting them and prosecuting them and getting them off the streets.
There are so many things wrong with that. While you have been in office, rape prosecutions have dropped by almost half. There's 20-year backlogs of rape kits. You have made Texas a haven for rapists with guns everywhere and forced birth for rape and incest. That's your policy.
Texas has always been a dynamic place for business. We have a lot of resources. We have a lot of money. Hell, we're the 9th largest economy in the world. So why is our state failing us? Why are we last or near the bottom in the number of people who have health care? Why do we suck at mental health, child welfare, maternal mortality? Why are our teachers underpaid? And why do we have fewer college graduates? In the 9th largest economy in the world, how are we failing at so many of the basics? Greg Abbott has run Texas into the ground.
I grew up in a friendly live and let live Texas, where as long as you weren't hurting anyone, we respected everyone's right to be themselves. But Abbott has changed that. Under Abbott, state government is bent on surveillance, conformity, and
Greg Abbott and his family have a nice health care plan, and we're paying for it. But nearly a quarter of us Texans don't have anything. In fact, Texas ranks dead last in the nation in healthcare coverage. Over 1 million Texans could be covered, but Abbott won't accept Medicaid expansion. That's our money. We already paid for it. But Abbott would rather let Texans die than to think that the government and our own tax dollars could actually make a difference in our lives. It's crazy and deadly.
After hundreds of Texans froze to death in their own homes in 2021, Greg Abbott says the grid's now fixed. But is it? Do we have any evidence? How do we know, Greg? Because we got alerts all summer long telling us to turn our thermostats to 80 degrees. That doesn't sound fixed. It sounds like Greg Abbott and his rich donors making millions while the rest of us Texans are stuck with the bill. This isn't normal. It doesn't happen in any other state in the country. Nowhere else do they have to cross their fingers every time it climbs above 90 and dips below 40. So thanks for nothing, Greg. Guess we'll just keep crossing our fingers. You know, like the way you govern.
Believe it or not, the overwhelming majority of Texans are against sexually abused kids being forced to have kids of their own before they're old enough to sit in the front seat of a car. But not you, Greg Abbott. Here you and your cronies are drunk on your power and caught up in some feverish extremism that is way over the line.
Do you know what's bad for your mental health? Knowing that your government is doing nothing whatsoever to help alleviate the anxieties that you're living under. Greg Abbott has let us all down. I'm at the movies or a concert with my friends, enjoying myself, having a great time, and there's that thought that a shooter could be coming over here, through that door, and I need to figure out some escape plan. That anxiety is stealing energy from my life. And although Greg Abbott didn't invent gun violence, he's done absolutely nothing to help prevent it. He says that this is a mental health issue, and then passes legislation that cuts mental health funding. People need to feel like the bad things can get better, but instead we're stuck in this hellscape. It's as almost if his policy is to do nothing at all. And so we just imagine it's going to get worse and worse. I want a new governor, so we can all have some mental relief.
When the shooting happened, silly me, you're probably wondering, which shooting? When the Uvalde Robb Elementary School shooting happened, people came to Greg Abbott and literally begged for him to call a special session and reevaluate the gun policy. Not take guns away entirely, just create a set of criteria for gun buyers that would make us all a little bit safer. And he couldn't even do that. He did not even show up for a single one of the victims' funerals. So if you're not gonna do anything in response to the shooting, you can't even show up for those families suffering intense loss. I mean, it's essentially as if he had a non-reaction to the whole thing happening. Am I wrong to notice just a little bit of hypocrisy there? I mean, kids are literally dying because a piece of extremely relaxed legislation that you refuse to even look at, and yet you'll bend over backwards to outlaw abortions that put people's lives and futures in jeopardy. Because that's just so wrong to you on a personal level.
Because your abortion ban ignores medical fact and necessity. Expectant mothers with pregnancy complications must risk their own death and the death of their hoped-for child, while also putting their doctor, their friends, and their families at risk of criminal prosecution. Did you not see the obviously cruel consequences of this law? Or did you just not care?
It's very clear, Greg Abbott, that your agenda is so distorted, it's not what the Texas residents want. You've made us all angry. You've made the mothers angry. And I feel like you have underestimated the power of women.
It would have been nice if we had a governor that was actually looking out for our safety instead of throwing us under the bus during a crisis for political gain. Greg Abbott failed us. As Texans, we deserve more.
Things can get better. You just got to start somewhere, and we need leadership who's open for that. Not these do-nothings like Greg Abbott.